being here today. Nice to see so many people enjoying our trainings that we bring here. I just have a couple of my usual announcements to run through for you, and then we'll get started. So for those of you who are not familiar with this campus, the bathrooms are just located across the clinic. And then there's coffee and water available in the kitchen at the last door on the end of the wall there. If you ever need to request accommodations for a disability, please let Laura or myself know. And I giggle because it's on the eval. And so I always mention it, but nobody ever pays attention to that part, I don't think. So anyways, mentioning the eval, if you could please complete that before you take off today, we really appreciate it. We do look at all of them and take your feedback, suggestions, comments. So we rely on that information from you to figure out what we want to do in the future. So let's see, don't forget to sign in and sign out in the back so that you can get credit for being here today. And you do not need a training verification form. And let's see here. That's about it, I guess. So we will go ahead and get started. Stacy Goodson is kind of a legend here. She foster care and adoptive parent, a recent recipient of our Daisy Franks Award, has just done tremendous things for us here at the agency and has an abundance of qualifications and skills. And so I'm going to let her actually tell us about her history and whatnot, and what she's able to do for us here in this training.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to place all my foster and adoptive skills and blame them on Ginny. She was our licensor when we started back in the day. So hi everybody, how are you doing today? Good. It's nice to see people, and I don't necessarily know everybody here. That's nice. Usually when I come here I see so many familiar faces, so it's nice to see new faces. Welcome to DA Blanchett. As she said, my name is Stacy Goodson. I've worked in child welfare for 9 years. I took a little break recently, but I found myself coming back quite promptly actually. Working on my master's degree, so I thought I would leave and do an easier job. Well, then I just came right back. So I'll be finished with that soon. I've worked in my years in child welfare in pretty much every area, foster care, adoption, licensing, recruitment. So I have a pretty wide array of experiences in foster care. My husband and I have been foster and adoptive parents for 7 years now, thanks to Ginny. Just kidding, I'll stop blaming it all on you. We've almost always had teens, most of them exiting residential facilities, and we've had 18 placements total, and then we've adopted, well, I say 4 of them. 3 of them were adopted, 1 was a guardianship, that are, all but 1 are grown up and out of the house. So we are right now at home with just 1 and really enjoying the calmness of just 1 teenager. Yeah, it's been really fun. So that's me in a nutshell. If I can just take a quick minute to kind of get a little bit of a better picture of who you guys are. Who works for Laura's program? Oh, okay. Okay. You sent out that nasty email. Like, sign up for this. How about foster care or adoption? Okay, and then you guys, St. John's back there, right? Okay. Anybody else? Am I missing? Anybody?
I have the early childhood attachment program.
Early child. Okay. Okay. Very cool. Well, welcome. So today, because of course we have to cover the objectives for your CEU, so here are the objectives that we're going to cover today. We'll talk first about how to establish a safe and a brave environment to have discussions about race and current events with your clients. It's not always easy to have conversations about race, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, why it's not easy, and then how to make it a little bit easier to have those conversations. We're going to acknowledge the difficulties surrounding conversations about race and race relations. Hopefully we'll be able to increase our own self-awareness about implicit bias that we have within ourselves, as well as some of the microaggressions that we might hear. Hopefully not too much within the work environment, but sometimes if you're in a client's home, in a foster home, things that you hear so that you may feel comfortable maybe talking with a foster or adoptive parent about that, especially if they're raising a kid that's a different race. And then we'll identify tangible ways to have challenging discussions about race and current events with your clients. So I certainly don't want to stand up here and only talk. So please ask questions, please engage in conversation. That'll definitely make it the most beneficial for everybody that's here. So please don't wait till the end to ask questions. Feel free to kind of chime in whenever you may have them. So here's some of the resources kind of where everything has been gathered for today's material. This is one of my newer favorite books that I've been reading a couple different times and actually doing a book club at my job with. It's got some really great information in it. Race Talk and the Conspiracy of Silence. This might be, we've found some really good conversations with our coworkers about this book. So that's kind of why I put that up there. And then I don't have Michelle Obama's book on here, but this one I've found some really good conversations with my daughter as she's been reading some of it. In reading it, it's got some really good information about Michelle. It's kind of her memoir and talks about her childhood and as she's grown up. So this also can lead to some good conversations. So just a couple ideas and some resources of what has gone into today's material. So this is a brave environment. I used to always say this is a safe environment, but I felt like, and some people brought up to me, that safe implies that the conversations might not be uncomfortable. Or if you say something and there's a reply to you that makes you feel uncomfortable, that it's no longer safe. We want to definitely make sure that everybody feels safe, but also that everybody feels brave enough to say what their thoughts are in order to be able to gain the most from the conversations and from the information. So using the courage to help us have the important conversations is really important with each other, and we want to be able to teach this to our clients as well, right? Teaching them how to be brave in having the conversations, and if something offends them or hurts them, we want them to be brave in bringing that up to adults as well so that they can have conversations about that. So is that fair for everybody? A pretty basic ground rule. Assume good intentions of what everybody is saying. Nobody is in this room because they are trying to be here and say mean, hurtful things to everybody, right? We're all here because we have good intentions and we want to learn. So if someone words something maybe that was a challenging question for them to ask and they don't word it in the best way, let's assume good intentions of what they're trying to ask and say so that we can gain the most benefit from the conversation. Is that fair? We can all agree on that? Okay. It's also important when we're talking with our clients to establish very informally, this isn't something that you're gonna like write up on a whiteboard or something when you're talking with your clients, but it's also important to establish a safe and a brave environment with our clients when we're having conversations about race. So some of the ground rules, again, that you wanna have with your clients are to assume good intentions. So whether that's laid out through numerous conversations with them or whether it's simply said to them, but it's very important to make sure that, especially of your client, you're assuming that they are trying to learn something and that they have good intentions. So whether that's your foster parents that you're working with, adopted parents, or youth that you're working with and having these conversations, it's important to assume good intentions of what they're saying. It's better to have these conversations after a relationship has been created. Why might that be? Like, why do I not want to meet a brand new client and then just start talking about race right after that?
You know their intentions, you don't have that before though.
Yeah. Hard to know their intentions and hard to have a trusting conversation if you don't have a relationship with somebody yet. So this is definitely a conversation that you want to have with clients after you've gotten to know each other a little bit and you've spent some time together. Not something that you want to have on your first meeting with them. Listen to genuinely hear the other person's point of view, not to respond. So this is something, especially when you have conversations about things that are emotionally taxing, right? This is something that's really hard to do. We want to make sure, especially if we're having conversations where we feel really passionate about one side or the other, that we're listening to the other person to hear what they have to say and that we're not listening just to give our response or rebuttal to them. It's also a good skill to teach our kids because a lot of them don't have it. They only know how to fight, right? They know how to just get right into the fight of everything. So a lot of times this is a skill that we can help teach them while we're having those conversations. So sometimes when I'm having conversations with kids that I work with, or my kids, I'll say, you know, I know that you're really passionate about this, and I really want to hear what you're saying, but let's both try to do a really good job of waiting for the other person to finish before we say something. And I kind of like to say both of us, because then it puts it on me, and I'm not only putting it on them to do it, if that makes sense. And then always be in person. Clearly, this isn't a conversation to have with your clients on social media. If you want to get into a Facebook rant with somebody that's not a client and you want to go back and forth about whatever, then okay, that's, you know, that's for you to do. But with our clients, we definitely don't want to be having these conversations over email, text, social media, anything like that. So make sure that these conversations are in person. Does anybody have anything that they would add to this? If you're having conversations with your clients, whether that's foster parents, adoptive parents, youth, about race, any ground rules you want to add to that? Okay. So discussions about race are hard. Does anybody disagree with that statement? Why are they hard? No matter what the dynamic or the racial makeup of people having the conversation, it can be hard. Why do we have such a hard time having conversations about race? In the workplace, let's start there. In the workplace, why do we have such a hard time having conversations about race?
I think we'd rather live in a perceived comfort or just status quo than rock the boat at all. Not beneficial, but I think we live for comfort or ease sometimes.
It's easier to be comfortable than uncomfortable, right? For sure. What else?
Fear of offending somebody.
Fear of offending somebody? Yeah, definitely. Fear of, I'm not gonna say this right, or it's gonna come across wrong. I don't wanna offend somebody because I care about them. Definitely. What about in a foster home? So say you're going out to a foster and adoptive home. I guess let me back up and ask a question. Have any of your foster and adoptive parents ever asked you questions about race, or ever tried to have a conversation with you about race? Oh, look at the opportunities that we have. Because statistically in Kent County, I don't know all the state statistics, but statistically in Kent County, many non-white children are placed in white homes. It was the percentage, and I had a really hard time getting these numbers from the training I did a couple weeks ago, but it was about 40% white, 45% white children in foster care in Kent County, and about 50% not white, but the foster parents that were not white was 10%. So statistically, many not white children are living in white foster homes. So that's an opportunity for us to be having conversations with these parents about race, because if they can be comfortable having the conversations with us, that can help them be comfortable having the conversations with their kids. Clearly none of you have come to my house, because you will get to have a conversation about race if you come to my house. Why would it be hard to have a conversation with your clients about race? Whether that's youth or parents. Same reasons? Yeah.
I feel like as social workers, we like to have empathy and you don't kind of relate in some level, but like race, if there's a difference, you just can't, and you never will, and you can say all that you want, but you can't, so there's already that divide there, that you want to be there present with that person, and that you can never be that way with them, and it's how to move on from that and still be present and build that relationship and that trust.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
So when we have a white social worker and African-American child, that happens a lot in Kent County too, right? Because let's look at this room. What's the majority of the race of people here working with the clients? It can be really hard to put ourselves in that empathic space with them because we really can't understand what they're going through. We've never been there. We can't begin to understand. So that definitely adds a dynamic and makes it difficult.
I think we bring our own biases sometimes
Ah.
too, coming from places, areas where there's less diversity in what we think, and to be honest, a lot of 22 to 25-year-old people out of college figuring things out, unsure. So I think just some of that lack of knowledge, understanding, maybe lack of importance of having that conversation, and then just the biases we bring.
Well, and you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Definitely. What else? Does everybody everybody think all of your clients trust you? No. That definitely makes it hard to have a conversation, right? Especially a difficult conversation. Society. What do I mean by that? Society makes it hard for us to have these conversations.
I think, especially lately, a lot of people are worried about like being politically correct and being worried about what other people are saying and how, and I think socially brain in society, we haven't been taught to be having these tough conversations and discussing these things. Like,
And some of us really in our upbringings, like Larry mentioned, in our upbringings, we've been taught to not have the conversations, to kind of sweep it under the rug. It's, if we just, with all hard conversations, with a lot of upbringings, hard conversations are taught to be kind of swept under the rug and just kind of move on and stay in that safe, comfortable space. So all that to say, it's definitely difficult to have this conversation from many different directions on many levels. So it's important to acknowledge that. Do I need to do anything with this patch thing down here? It's okay?
you can drag it off the screen if you want.
I mean, it doesn't bother
It'll
me.
go
I just
away.
want to make sure I didn't need to do
It'll go
something.
away.
It's
It'll
okay.
go away.
All right. So a mutual and authentic relationship with your client is imperative to have prior to having a discussion of this type. When I say mutual and authentic, it has to be both ways. Like the client has to have that trust and relationship with you. It can't only be the relationship you have with them. And if you don't feel that you have this type of relationship with your client, you have to build a relationship first before you're having conversations about race. I worked in foster care for a long time. I would never think about talking with a brand new mom about termination the first time I met her, right? Like that's a conversation that's really, really hard to have, and I want to have a relationship with them first before I have that conversation. So it's really important when we're having conversations with our clients to make sure that we have relationships with them first. Has anybody ever heard of implicit bias? Who has them within their minds and bodies? Everybody. Everybody. This is a way for our brain to organize things. We all have them. But they're subtle and often subconscious stereotypes that guide our expectations and interactions with people. Not all of them are negative. Many of them are. But this is kind of our brain's way to organize our thoughts, and that guides our interactions with people that we come across in the world. A definition of implicit bias is the bias in judgment and or behavior that results from subtle cognitive processes that often operate at a level below conscious awareness and without intentional control. So again, it's part of what our brain's doing to organize our thoughts, and we don't always have the ability to consciously be aware of them, but that's where we have to get better. So we have to be aware of some of these things that our brain is saying and some of the thoughts that we're having, because we can change our implicit bias, right? We can change some of those thoughts that experiences as we've grown up have taught us. Does anybody believe differently now as an adult politically than they did as a child? As you've learned and as you've grown older and become more educated, you've learned how to think differently, right? In a political world, we can learn how to think differently about people as well. So I'm not trying to ask everybody what your implicit bias are, but definitely something to be aware of and ask yourself as you are coming across clients and working with people. It helps our minds to order and navigate overwhelming complexities of reality. So as we go through some of these next slides, I want you to be really aware of your internal dialogue. We all have some things going on in our minds, right? When we're thinking of what we're going to say, when we're going to answer a question, when we're going to speak to somebody. We have what we really think, what our real thoughts are, right? Those are coming to the forefront of our mind, but then we have what we think we're supposed to think. What does society, or what does my boss, or what does my friend think that I'm supposed to think? And then what do you say aloud, right? Does everybody agree that sometimes we have these internal dialogues? We have, right? So in order to really address some of the implicit bias, you really have to be willing to acknowledge what you really think. I'm not even saying you have to get to a place today where you have to be willing to say what you really think. But in order to make changes or to be having healthy conversations, you have to be willing to